Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're breaking down a truly fascinating, completely alternative geopolitical theory presented by the speakers in our source material. This isn't your standard evening news recap. We're looking at a highly complex perspective that argues the reality we see on the global stage, it's actually a carefully managed script, and the real levers of power are hidden entirely out of plain sight.
So here's how we're going to unpack all of this. We've got a 5-part agenda today, and it's built kind of like concentric circles. We'll start big with global geopolitics and power shifts, then look at the crypto financial network, touch on media narratives and hyper-reality, explore shifting Middle Eastern alliances, and finally zoom all the way down to grassroots action and local power.
Right, let's kick things off with Section 1, Global Geopolitics and Power Shifts. The core assertion here from the speakers is that the recent U.S.-Iran conflict is essentially a simulation, specifically designed to bypass the traditional City of London banking cartel.
According to the analysis in the source material, these highly publicized hostilities just aren't what they seem. The claim is that initiatives like Operation Epic Freedom are actually forms of backdoor coordination rather than genuine acts of war. It's a managed script. The military-industrial complex gets their orders filled, regimes get to look strong to their people, and everybody basically wins. Well, everybody except for those traditional banking cartels that are being deliberately cut out of the loop.
And the speakers perfectly capture how this stays under wraps with this quote: "The truth is hidden in the unthinkable." It's actually a brilliant strategic point. Ideologically speaking, neither a die-hard Fox News supporter here in the US, nor an orthodox Iranian academic could ever really fathom their respective leaders actively working together behind the scenes. Because the very idea completely short-circuits their established worldviews, it becomes the absolute perfect cover for these maneuvers.
Which brings us to Section 2, the crypto financial network. The speakers claim a vast, totally hidden cryptocurrency infrastructure is what's really funding these global shifts.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer scale of what we're talking about. The speakers make this massive claim that somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of Iran's financial transactions are currently running through Tether or USDT. So the profound irony here, according to the source, is that by using Tether, Iran is inadvertently backing the US Treasury. It turns traditional geopolitical financial warfare entirely on its head.
The source material actually details a multi-step pipeline for this network. Step 1 is about subverting sanctions by building an alternative digital infrastructure. The speakers point to an Iranian crypto architect who is supposedly sitting in jail, but is actually now operating out of London setting up new companies. Step 2 involves funneling this capital through hundreds of shell companies. Then, Step 3 anchors the whole operation in a friendly jurisdiction. The claim is that Tether's operations have been strategically moved offshore to El Salvador because it's closely aligned with U.S. interests but safely outside the immediate reach of standard congressional oversight.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, Media Narratives and Hyperreality. Because naturally, you're probably wondering why this massive global shift isn't on the front page of every newspaper, right? Well, that brings us to the media matrix.
To explain this, the source leans heavily on the French philosopher Jean Baudrillard and his concept of the simulacra, or hyperreality. Think of it as a simulated media holography that basically replaces actual physical reality with a totally constructed narrative. The speakers argue that when you're watching the news today, you aren't really seeing the world at all. You're merely following a virtual reality through your screen. The public is fed a fabricated narrative designed to trigger them emotionally, while the actual business happens quietly in the shadows.
Let's look at a direct example of this hyperreality in action. Contrast the mainstream narrative, like networks reporting that U.S. bases were totally destroyed by Iranian strikes, with the claimed reality from the speakers, that only an empty housing area was struck, and the dependents had conveniently been sent home a month prior. According to the analysis, military targets are left empty on purpose in a pre-arranged deal. This perfectly manufactures consent and gives the public the conflict they expect, but without any real casualties or actual escalation to war.
Now for Section 4, Shifting Middle Eastern Alliances. The speakers point to some extremely strange maneuvers right before this conflict that suggest a completely prearranged geopolitical alignment.
Let's move to this and see how this builds. Just look at these incredibly complex and seemingly contradictory alliances. The UAE reportedly left OPEC and, on that exact same day, launched a massive AI fund with U.S. tech backing. And on that very same day, Israel reportedly sent laser defense technology to the UAE. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is quietly insisting on 1967 borders for Palestine, and Oman is openly acknowledging that Iran is not the enemy.
The speakers argue that all these regional powers actually recognize they need a stable Iran, and they're quietly moving their chess pieces to ensure regional stability, completely outside the traditional Western media narrative.
And then there's this number, 1.8 billion. That is the barrel capacity of the UAE's Fujairah pipeline. The speakers highlight that this massive pipeline was fully operational right before any shots were fired. Why is that absolutely crucial? Because it completely bypasses the Strait of Hormuz. They literally had the infrastructure ready to completely ignore the exact blockade the media was breathlessly warning us about.
Finally, Section 5, Grassroots Action and Local Power. We're going to make a massive leap here, from global pipelines straight to local living rooms, because the source material uses all this global chaos to make a profound point about individual empowerment.
So, if the world is locked into this high-level simulation, what on earth can the average citizen do? Well, the speakers compare modern citizens trying to resist the digital surveillance state to the Luddites of England. You know, the folks who tried to smash factory machines during the Industrial Revolution. They argue that resisting inevitable technology is just totally futile. The true goal shouldn't be stopping the machine, but controlling it. They propose that citizens should seize the surveillance apparatus and force politicians to submit to it, to guarantee total transparency and accountability.
And that entire philosophy is anchored by this classic quote, "All politics is local." This is the speaker's ultimate thesis. True power doesn't lie in stressing out over international simulations or fighting the global media matrix. Real, tangible power lies in taking over your own local government.
To actually pull this off, the speakers detail a parallel infrastructure of accountability called Take America Back, or TAB. The process is pretty straightforward. Citizens read a specific series of 5 foundational books, they take a university-certified course, they get TAB certified, which basically binds them to principles of transparency and moral courage, and then, the most important step, they run for local office. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the opportunity here. It's absolutely staggering. According to the source, there are currently 300,000 vacant or totally uncontested local government seats across America right now.
And we aren't just talking about minor roles here. We're looking at precinct party head seats, mayoral and city council positions, and massively influential special boards and county commissions. The speakers give this totally shocking anecdote to prove why this matters. In Lancaster, Pennsylvania, there is a water board with a $2 billion budget. $2 billion! And it has an empty seat. Just 2 people sitting on it, and virtually zero public oversight. It just shows how much local power is literally sitting on the table, waiting for organized citizens to walk in and claim it.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question based on everything we've covered today. If the global geopolitical stage, from the Strait of Hormuz all the way to the City of London, is indeed a carefully managed illusion, is true power actually waiting to be claimed right now in your own backyard? It's a wildly fascinating perspective that shifts the focus from feeling helpless globally to taking real action locally. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it sparks some deep curiosity for you, and I definitely encourage you to keep asking the big questions.